our guests, Lorcan O'Herlihy and Frances Anderton, who will take us on a lively conversation about the book release and Lorcan's philosophical approach to his work and a more detailed look, I think, at some of his projects.
It's really an honor on multiple levels tonight. One, to be co-presenting this with Angela. Two, to be talking with Lorcan, with whom I am, lucky enough to have had a relationship, I think over 2 decades, watching Lorcan's career grow and flourish. And then I got to write the introduction to the book that we're going to talk about tonight, Architecture is a Social Act, which he will, lay out the degree to which that has been his goal throughout all his work. So here we are. Let's go straight to the book. Lorcan will tell you at a certain point in his story that he's slightly backing off of very vivid colors, but certainly not when it comes to this book and its design, its appearance. So here we have Architecture is a Social Act. I think it's your 3rd monograph, is it, Lorcan?
It is indeed.
Yes,
it is
yes,
indeed,
published by Frame, each book, another step, like certain architects who put their ideas out in books at the same time as they are developing them in the flesh. And you are certainly an architect that does that. As I said, I got to design the introduction and I got bold-faced name. There I am, bold-faced name. So, and in that introduction, I was able to explore some of the themes that Lorcan is going to explain much more clearly tonight. And those themes are that this is an architect who one, I think, has been very prescient about kind of where the momentum is going in architecture, and certainly in Los Angeles, we have come to a place where housing matters a lot, and this is a place where Lorcan has most definitely made a real impact. But over and above the housing, Lorcan brings to his work a singular combination, I would say, of extremely inventive and bold visual style, as well as a very strong sense of social space, and has, with each project, endeavored to figure out how to sort of fuse things that don't always necessarily cohere. And it's in fact quite a challenge. I was actually talking to my husband, Robin, who those of you that know me probably know my crazy husband, Robin, and actually I was just saying, I'm going to be talking to Lorcan tomorrow night. How do you describe this work? And he said, it's with incredible style. And I thought, wow, I took a whole chapter to say something not as succinctly as that. So anyway, humanism with amazing style, I think, is a nice way of getting into Lorcan's work. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually have a lovely visual display of his projects. We're going to go through those for about 35 minutes or so. Then we're going to throw open the floor to questions. But the Lorcan that many of us know is the Lorcan who's been in LA working very hard for the last at least 20 years. There was a child Lorcan at one point, and and child Lorcan actually had experiences in his life that led to adult Lorcan. And they're quite important experiences. And I thought that we should really go right back to the beginning and start with that. So with that, Lorcan, throw it to you. Which one of these characters is you? And what are you doing in this picture? And how does it lead into our story?
Right. Thank you, Frances. It's such a pleasure to be here and chatting with you. This image, coincidentally, is an image of a film that I was in. I'm on the left of this image. I'm the smaller of the two.
This little guy?
My older brother is on the right, and my dad is in the middle. And it talks about part of my wonderful opportunity as a child, where I traveled. My dad would make films. He was a film actor. And
Dan O'Herlihy.
Dan O'Herlihy was my dad, yes, and he was a character actor, but he had a very respected, admired career. And what's interesting was he was from Dublin, Ireland as well, and he loved to do work, both European films and films in Hollywood, for that matter. So what was so nice was he would always take the family when he was making these films. So for me, the opportunity to see the world, different cities, it was so extraordinary, and it's certainly This particular image is in Uzhgorod, which was when I was there, it was called the Union Soviet Socialist Republic, which is now Uzhgorod, which is in the Ukraine. And so I spent 6 months on location with my dad and mom and my brother and I. And this was part of my experience as a child, to be able to travel, to see cities, and to also see different parts of the world. So I was always fascinated about, culture and countries and how people engage each other. Interesting point here is in the background, you see all these army, and that's the Russian army. And so it was actually filmed in Russia because they had opportunities to use the Russian army to be in the movie, to be the French, the Prussians, the Brits during the Battle of Waterloo. So the film was called Waterloo. It's the Battle of Waterloo. So I was a drummer boy, and I died in the film. So there is a scene of me being shot and killed as a 10-year-old. So that was the beginning and end of my film career.
But this is so fantastic. I'm sorry, we're going to get to architecture very shortly. But you were in a film about the Battle of Waterloo that was filmed in communist Russia using
Indeed.
Russian soldiers. And there's your dad having a drink. Is he having a drink of water or a Russian?
It was most likely water. Definitely, he wasn't a big drinker. As an Irishman, that's unlikely or unusual. But he certainly didn't drink much. But his character was Marshal Ney, who was Napoleon's right-hand man in that war, the last battle that Napoleon had before he was exiled. So wonderful story, Waterloo, and very European story.
Very European, but also a story of community, because even though you're not in a physical architectural space here, you are moving. You're moving with the sort of thespian community, as you've called it yourself at times, which is sort of having to set up camp, literally, with productions, and that's what you're doing. So as you go to each new place, be it Ukraine or wherever, you're having to sort of form a community. So I'm assuming that sort of figured into your thinking that came later.
It did indeed. It was an extraordinary story. It was a Russian-Italian production. Dino De Laurentiis was the producer, and the director was Sergei Bondarchuk, who was known or renowned for War and Peace. So the fascinating idea is you had Italians and Russians, and you had the English, and a collective people all living in one hotel in this small town called Uzhgorod, which is in the Ukraine. It was an extraordinary experience. I had 2 Russian friends, my brother and I had, which we didn't speak Russian and they didn't speak English. But the stories we had were extraordinary, hanging out with each other and cooking potatoes on little river beds and things like that. So really extraordinary experience to, again, connect with people, and certainly connecting with these young Russian children, which was wonderful.
Great. So let's go to Lorcan a little bit older and start still visiting the world, and different cities make different impressions on you. Quick run through, of course, I being British was very struck by image bottom left of the Sex Pistols. And I thought, wow, did Lorcan spend some time as a fanboy of the Sex Pistols?
Indeed. I was a big fan of their work at the time, not all their work, but a lot of it. But this image is, the 4 images are interesting because I've always been fascinated by urban culture. And again, as I mentioned, as a child, I got to live in Spain, I got to live in Italy, I got to live in London. And I was always enamored and excited about being in these cities. And more than anything was where people gather and hang out. I always loved to get the Herald Tribune and go to a piazza and sit there and have my coffee, even as a young child. And I'll read the newspaper. I always loved that. So I just remembered from my background was always been fascinated by these type of spaces. And, frankly, people inherently are social. And it was something that really was close to my heart as well. And I feel like these ideas are underpinning the work that I'm doing now. So the idea of being able to engage cities and bring those ideas to the work later on as an architect was really exciting. I personally think LA could use more spaces like this. So I'm trying in a small way in my work to find elements of this within my work within the city of Los Angeles to create that opportunities for people to gather, social spaces. I'm convinced that that's where the city has to go.
Right. Do you think it should have spaces like Buckingham Palace?
Not necessarily. I think there needs to be, our way of doing it is, given the density, is more like pocket parks or areas that are just literally interstitial spaces that you can bring to life. And that's what I think is essential.
Perfect. And you've just given me the perfect setup, Lorcan, to the next slide, because I happen to know what the next slide is. And I wanted to say to everybody, note top left in those 4 images that you had, the lady sitting on the stone bench. Okay, so here we are in a project of yours, Habitat 825, one of your early, now it's become an early project. It caused, you know, a stir and on many levels when it was first being built and opened. And here it is, it's now, what, 2000, oh gosh, what was the year?
It was built in 2008, 2007.
This is right. And here so here's 825 Kings Road, and tell us about it, and start with the bench, and then we'll get into the architecture.
Yes. Well, this was an idea about trying to bring that idea of social space to private property. I mean, this is a public space on private land, which is an extraordinary gesture. When one thinks of Los Angeles, one always thinks about this privatized city where you build to your property line, you put a 6-foot fence around it or wall, and you look inward. Well, this was an opportunity to actually expand that bandwidth of sidewalk and to give opportunities for people to sit and hang out on benches. And these were concrete benches, but it's interesting. This is a public space on private land. And that's, to me, a very, very important step for Los Angeles, to see that idea, that blurred edges between private and public realm. And that's something that's always fascinated me. Can you borrow space from the private developments for the public? And that's something that started here, coincidentally, not only in terms of the front of the building, but also the idea of engagement as social experience. And you can see in the image on the right, that also talks about the idea that you can have a theatrical quality to it, in a sense, where urban experience can be watching people on all levels. So this is a microcosm of the nature of how cities are, but you can certainly bring it to your work as an architect. So in a sense, we could play that role, even though as architects, we are certainly commissioned to do certain projects, but you can bring that energy and that understanding that to underpin your ideas with these type of spaces where people can engage each other. Interestingly enough, people in this building see this as like a dormitory. They feel really connected to each other. And I believe it has to do with the way that it's designed, that they feel connected.
But very much it's layering, because the stone seat is out there on the street and it is intended for any passerby, which is quite unusual to do with. One doesn't see much of that happening in developments in Los Angeles. We don't really even put benches out on the street for people. So actually, I'm sort of a bit curious, do people use this bench?
They certainly do. Interestingly enough, they do sit there and wait to meet a colleague or friends who are going to the Schindler House next door. So that's a very interesting kind of cross-pollination of ideas, that one can wait here to go to the Schindler House next door. And that's a very interesting idea, that you see your building as a part of the community, part of the neighborhood. And that's what was quite fascinating, because there isn't a place to wait for friends to go in the Schindler House. You have to wait on the sidewalk or the street, whereas these benches become used in that way. And people do have lunch there. It's not necessarily people or tenants in the building, but actually people who happen to be wanting to have their lunch, they want to sit here and eat, and they're more welcomed. They're welcome to do that.
And you've mentioned that this is right next door to the Schindler House. Yes, very important neighbor. And there was some concern at the time about the scale. This is obviously a much higher scale, and we're in a time period where we can't do the very low scale sort of bungalow court multifamily development. We're going up higher, but you very definitely aimed to get something of the courtyard experience into this building. What was involved in that? It's obviously space is money. Did you work with a singular supportive developer?
Indeed. Indeed, a very supportive, wonderful man named Richard Loring, who had a group, Habitat Group Los Angeles. And I am thrilled and honored to have working on Richard on a number of projects. This one was close to both of our hearts. And the idea to be able to produce a wonderfully important housing project next to the Schindler House, we embrace the idea of and recognize the importance to respect the Schindler House by dropping the volume 15 feet below the height allowables next to the Schindler House. So we dropped it into a 2-story volume, as you can see, next to the Schindler House, but we also carved into the earth and created a courtyard that was lower. That's how we're able to play with the density. So we not only carved into the, in a sense, the courtyard area, as you can see, 2 people are walking down from the street, but that created a greater sense of life in that area. So it was really interesting how to manipulate the massing of the building to respect the Schindler House, so no shadows are cast on it, at the same time to create this open, airy quality to the building. The density of this building is pushed to the north side, which is a larger volume, which is 4 stories, but we made it sure it was 2-story next to the Schiller House.
Right, right. And obviously this was also a condominium development.
Indeed it
so,
was.
So it was higher income. And with that, because we're going to go through some different income levels in terms of your projects, but let's go to the next very important condo project that you did. Tell us about this and what's the connection to the image on the right?
Well, this in a way reconnects to my relationship with my dad, who used to go to Formosa Cafe with his colleagues, Orson Welles. He was he was a partner, or he was also involved with the Mercury Theater when that started with Orson. And so they've known each other for many years in the early years. So when I had this opportunity to build a building down the street from Formosa, I thought, well, what's the contextual link? And I thought the color of Formosa was what inspired me, as opposed to the style of adjacent buildings. So context is always fascinating that way. Where do you find that context? So for me, it was color. So that was the driving force of Formosa Cafe. It's a really interesting cafe, but I was intrigued about that. So I brought that idea to the building. And
Formosa 1140, we should say, as its name.
Yeah, Formosa 1140. And what was key to this project was another fascinating idea to, in a sense, rethink the quintessential courtyard housing project and take this idea that perhaps you can push the building to one side and open a pocket park to the community. So make that, in a sense, how courtyard housing always have the central area as the common open space, but you can in a sense overlay that to a public space that we did with this pocket park. And it was very complex, though. One can imagine you're putting a public park on private land. There's a lot of issues involved there, in a sense that the owners of this building own the park, but it's actually it's ran by the city of West Hollywood. So very interesting to not only work with Richard as a client, but the city and us, of course, to be able to come bring this to fruition. So fascinating idea. I'm convinced that if this idea could be multiplied, it would be a good thing for Los Angeles to have these pocket parks, so one can walk to a park as opposed to jumping in your car and driving to the beach or driving to Griffith Park or to the mountains. But that idea that you can walk to a green space would be wonderful.
So I'm going to ask a couple of questions about the park momentarily, but I do just want to remember a little anecdote, which was a third leg of the stool, as it were, in this project was John Chase, the late John
Indeed.
Chase, who was the urban designer of the
Absolutely.
city of West Hollywood at that time, who was very, very supportive of this project. He really wanted more pocket parks in West Hollywood. And I remember meeting John one day, and he was wearing the most vivid red striped suit. And because he was about to go off to a meeting to make the case for this project, and he decided to dress up sort of in keeping with the project, because that's the sort of thing that John would do. So,
Yes.
So I remember that so well. So
it was a magical time with John. And I another side note to add to yours wonderful comment is he came to me after and said, "Lorcan, I got in trouble. I'm not supposed to be supportive of a particular project, but they saw a connection between my
between the outfit,
my outfit in your building." And it was with a big smile he said it. But of course, that was John. Wonderful. None of this is, you're absolutely right, in terms of the opportunity for us and myself to be able to work in West Hollywood. Without having John there as the urban designer, it would have been impossible. He was a supporter of good architecture and architecture that made a difference.
Right, and very, very sadly died in 2010. Yeah. But I think he left a legacy, and it's been picked up. But to this point about the park, which is obviously very interesting, and it's kind of provocative what you did. Did you, obviously this was speculative, you didn't have your residence yet when you were planning all of this. But so to the extent you could sort of think about what the residents of the condos, who are paying a fairly good amount of money to live, to reside by this pocket park, which is then going to be used by whoever wants to use it. Idealistically a great idea, but do you sense that the residents are happy with that relationship? And do you ever feel that perhaps they would prefer to have had their own inner courtyard?
I feel it's aligned more with favorable, like they like the idea of the park, that they can look out at a park, which quite obviously it's a wonderful, full-grown park right now. But there's no question about it. There's always some issues. There's some tension, I would say, perhaps by some of the owners in the building, knowing that, yes, there's a park and public space right next to their building. But that's a very urban story. And it's something that anyone who moves to cities have to embrace that idea. So overall, and certainly when we presented it to the neighborhood, when we started the project, most people liked the idea, but it's a very good point. The owners of the units, I would say more likely they are very happy with it as opposed to being against it. And part of that has to do with the light and air that they have, because when you do this, it means a portion of the building has a 45-foot bandwidth to the other building as opposed to being compressed right next to it. And as we all know, urban infill buildings in Los Angeles, you just have your 5 to 7 or 3 to 5 foot setbacks on the sides. So you're really looking at, in effect, a 10-foot bandwidth between each building, but here you have over 45 feet. So there's a really interesting component to it, which I think works.
Very interesting indeed, and obviously the appearance of it is enormously striking.
I've always held a position that to do architecture and to do work of consequence, one needs to bring artistry to the more larger stories and the critical issues of social engagement and agency to projects. You need to do both. We're a visual art, and we need to be able to do both. So I do bring that to the table, and I've had some wonderful clients over the years, thank you all, who've been also committed to design and realized that design is important and it does work, and it certainly has value. That's also a very important component.
But what's very important is getting the balance right, so that this facade that we're looking at, these layers of these metal screens, are not just layers of metal screens. Behind them is a walkway, behind them is a staircase. Yes. It's the interconnecting of the function and the form. And I believe you're a bit of a fan of Mr. Form follows function, Mies van der Rohe. Yeah. So that's always something that has to be balanced. But over it's to formative. Did you say it's performative?
Yes, in other words, all the spaces in between, it frames the circulation. So the circulations in between the exterior skin, which is the red and orange panels, and then the building, which is exactly what you said, is 4 feet back. And that's the wood, the dark charcoal graphite color wood.
Right. I thought you meant performative as in theatrical, because it's quite theatrical.
It certainly is.
Yes. So back to the place where your father hung out with Mr. Orson Welles, that you said fairly passed over that one. So anyway, Orson Welles and your dad, Dan O'Herlihy, would sit around in Formosa drinking, and that brings to mind, and socializing over drinks and food, and that's something that students do a lot. So let us go to students and something you designed for them opposite, and this has something in common with Habitat 825 in as much as it too is very close to a very significant building.
Absolutely. So this project went through a long story where there was another proposal for this site that was rejected, and our colleague Michael Webb, who lives in the Neuter building, the Strathmore Apartments, was wonderful in terms of encouraging the developer to look at architects who could really think about a solution that would work on that site, but also recognize how important it is to build adjacent to a historical landmark, which of course Neuter is Strathmore Apartments. So this was a commission I was very excited about. So the building itself is in a way responding to its adjacency. So the lower volume of the building in this particular view on the left is next to the Strathmore Apartments, which is a 2-story volume that steps up a hill. So we were conscious to not produce a 6-story building right across the street from the 2-story. But what was interesting, by really looking at the complexities and the constraints of the site, led to a more interesting building where you have the step massing. By pushing the density low when it's next to a 2-story building, but also push the density 6 or 7 stories when it was commensurate with the buildings next to it on the backside, but also allowed the opportunity to afford us the opportunity to actually activate all the roof decks. And that's really interesting because then people connect to the street vertically. And that was the idea with each one of these levels actually have outdoor spaces. And that's a great place for students to study, to hang out, and not only to learn, but to actually engage each other. So it's very activating the building when you do that with roofs. It's a wonderful opportunity in buildings to do that.
Right.
And that was kind of the key idea with it. So can you have that vertical engagement through buildings? If you can't do it in perhaps plan because you're constrained, one can look at a building in section and you can also accomplish it.
Right. Now, what's interesting about this is that the lodgings for the students are themselves in close proximity to the terraces, because I've certainly heard from people who live in some of the loft buildings who love the idea of the garden on the roof, but they don't actually go to the garden on the roof that often. If they're, say, 5 stories down, they find that they get into a pattern of perhaps not going up there because it's not, you can't walk out the door and there it is. So with this one, for many of the students have almost direct access to one of the terraces. Is that right?
Indeed, they do. And it's such a healthy environment for them to be able to go outside, certainly with this period of COVID-19. It's the idea of have access to exterior is so important. So in a sense, it's an important building that's not only for now, but also post-pandemic time. People will start to really utilize these spaces and certainly to continue their education. It's a great place to hang out, but it's also a great place to study and to do what you need to do as in the world of education.
So, but moving the outdoor space up, very much a part of what's going on in multi-unit housing today. Let's move on to a next phase of your work, which you're very much engaged with right now, and so are many other very admired architects in LA, which is housing for the much less affluent, sometimes the formerly unhoused. Tell us about this project. Oh no, we didn't give the name of the last project, SL, and it's Strathmore. Yes. Strathmore, and what does the L stand for?
Strathmore and Levering.
Strathmore Levering, yes.
Levering, that's the SL.
Right.
It is, the actual address is 11024. That's a very long-winded name. So I just call it the SL building right now to make it simpler, but yes.
I know you have these names that seem like codes, but in fact they're just street numbers.
Indeed.
But not that Space Odyssey film from Lucas from a few years ago that had a kind of numbers and letters kind of name. Anyway, here we are at MLK, correct?
Right, absolutely.
So tell us about this.
Yeah, it was, in a sense, it was driven by the idea, but can you bring quality design to all socioeconomic levels? Can you produce good architecture for those in need? So this was for previously homeless veterans and the chronically homeless individuals, and that's who are the tenants in this building. And I've always seen these buildings as opportunities to act as catalysts for change in the neighborhood. The area is somewhat distressed. It's an area that coincidentally is close to USC, close to the Coliseum, but at the same time, like everything in the city of Los Angeles, you could find one pocket that is in need of renewal and other areas that are already renewed. And so this was an opportunity to produce a good piece of architecture that would start to actually encourage a better lifestyle in this area. So it's MLK in Vermont. And it was next to a McDonald's on one side, and then on the other side is some interesting duplexes. So this building was about providing a building that also stitched into the neighborhood, but also key issues, which in a way was about connection to the street. So there were strategic huts in the building that afforded people upstairs on the podium level to be able to connect to this sidewalk and street. And we also provided, not dissimilar to Habitat 825, is a stoop, which is available to all the public, and that's up that stair. So that, in a sense, is on private land, but it's a public stoop or a public place to sit. And so if there are people who don't have a place to sit and want to hang out, they can go up there and sit. And it certainly could be someone who's perhaps didn't have the opportunity to move into the building, but it's just a gesture. Can you provide a building that allows people to stop and hang out? And that's what the purpose of that space was. And quite obviously, the image on the right was a wonderful evening. It was a Thanksgiving dinner. And to me, I see this as like an outdoor living room. The idea was that can you create a central area where people can come and engage each other? And that was very important to this project as well. And that image certainly starts to speak of that. There's a community room / kitchen you can see in the background of the image on the right, and places for people to sit and hang out, and also greening. We have trees on that volume, on that level as well. So really, again, an idea to bring this social agency to these projects. You can do this with these type of projects. And you can see that image right there, which is really bringing design, bringing artistry to these spaces. It's uplifting. I have to say, I've obviously been there a number of times, and it's wonderful talking to the people who are living there now. And what's so nice is it's called permanent supportive housing, meaning if they can stay there permanently, this could be their home for 20 years, 30 years, if they choose to. And they are. There has been very few people who have left, and that's what's really exciting. Unfortunately, they were on the street for a variety of reasons. For example, there are families. There's 3 bedrooms in here, because as we all know, in terms of what's going on right now with homeless, there are families on the streets. So this was also giving them opportunities to be able to stay in buildings like this, and all of a sudden a sense of place, a sense and roots. And that was the purpose of the building. But design, again, is important. And what's nice about this one was my wonderful client, it was Clifford Beers Housing, it was Christian Omuda, another great client committed to design. And I have to say, it was a wonderful experience working with Christian, and we're now working with him on 4 other projects right now. So very exciting to build this relationship with this amazing nonprofit organization. And again, it's about a commitment to design and realize the importance of it.
Right, but then there's persuading those that pay the checks of the importance of it, because we all know that it's now land is exceedingly expensive.
Yes.
It can cost, you know, $500,000 to produce a unit of what's known as affordable housing.
Right.
And so one would assume that wherever possible, the developers, the builders, will find ways to standardize aspects of the design, to cut out complexity. I look at this bird's eye view image. There's clearly complexity in this design. Just looking at the grass-roofed building, how do you persuade the investors, the bankers, the whoever, that this is worth paying for?
Well, the way it's designed is efficiency built into it. And as an architect, we're always struggling with how do you recognize the importance of budget, but how do you bring artistry to it? So our goal here at my office, LOHA, is that it's something that I've been driven for many years, is to also understand we have to design. If you want to build ideas, you have to make sure it pencils out. There's no question about it. We only have certain funding and resources for these types of buildings. And it's a way of how one designs. If you can build efficiency and design it well, meaning all the units are stacked vertically, all the kitchens and bathrooms are vertical, all the demising walls are lined up, you know that you built through the design an efficient building, then it gives you opportunity or affords you to be able to find some moments in the building that is uplifting. And that's equally important. So again, as I said, artistry and science, artistry and efficiency is so critical. And that's what we bring to the table. But again, I think the idea of, it's the art of also persuasion as you're presenting ideas, and understand that it will bring value. I'm convinced, for example, the very simple idea of accessing from exterior to these units and rejecting the idea of a double loaded quarter is a reasonable approach. We found out that doing entering your unit like this, which is it's absolutely appropriate in California in this climate, was a penciled out same cost of having it as a double loaded conditioned spaces. Now that's my point.
What is the double loaded corridor? The double loaded corridor, where you
that you see that quite often. The experience
on
is
both
limited.
Sides. Yes.
Yeah, and this always leads to wonderful passive design strategies. You can open a window on one side, open a window on the other, and you have cross ventilation. Very simple moves like that make the spaces better. And I have to say, my clients, including Christian, embraces that idea wholeheartedly. So that's what we were pushing on this. And it was a wonderful experience altogether. It was built really well as well, which is exciting.
Sure. So let's go on to the next project that has some aspects in common with this, and a very dramatic image. Tell us about this.
Indeed. Again, it was with Christian, Clifford Beers Housing. And this also talks about this idea of we're running out of land, as you can see in this image in Los Angeles. And now you have these challenging sites that you find, which are not in ideal situations. They're challenging in a sense that it's a hodgepodge of a number of properties that you're kind of, in a way, cobbling it together. This particular site was 3 different sites that became one, and it was a wedge shape. So the challenge on this one is how can you bring, obviously, quality design again to these type of projects, but the future is going to be these type of properties we're going to have to work with. There are a number of sites like this the city owns next to freeways. And so the idea is, can you bring good design to these particular sites, but also recognize that you need to be able to address issues of toxins from the freeways. And that led to another interesting idea where the space between our building and the freeway, we actually vacated that street to a degree. It became, in a way, a slow space or a shared street, meaning that it was also for both pedestrians and bikes became equally important on this site. But it allowed us to be able to plant trees on that property because our site was so compressed to be able to get all the units we needed. we didn't have space to really plant trees to create this upper buffer from the freeways. So it was a great opportunity not only to create this idea of a shared street, but also to provide, in a way, a green lung that would pull in all the toxins so it's a healthy environment. And I do believe within the city of Los Angeles, these sites need to be tackled. They do exist, but it's challenging. So the idea as an architect is, can we solve it? And I think this could be conceivably a case study for future projects where you can actually address issues of toxins and address the complexity of building next to freeways, but also solving it in terms of creating a somewhat healthy environment. That's our goal.
So here we are looking, yes,
there.
and it's not built yet.
Not built, it's under construction. They have the modified containers on the site. And that's the other key issue to this was, it was a modified container building, meaning that we were building these containers in the factory while we're doing all the site utilities. So if you go to the site now, foundations are in, all the site utilities are being placed in. But the interesting thing is we're not waiting for all that to be done to build the building. The building's being built in a factory. So it's going to be shipped and it's to the site in the next month. And right now it's already been completed. And so it's very exciting. We saved over 8 months in the schedule by building the units in a factory while we're doing all the site work. And that's, I think, also the future. How can you expedite the schedules? And that's crucial with regards to housing, certainly within homeless housing. We need to build more. We need to build it faster. And this is an approach to be able to do that.
Right.
But
And
this is fascinating also because, again, can you use this idea of supportive housing, but actually make it better, make the environment better, make the community better? So this slow street we have here, which is called the Annenberg Paseo, because the Annenberg Foundation has been wonderful. They were providing $2.5 million to build this Paseo. So that's really exciting, but it's a public space, not only for the tenants, but also the public at large.
But the very real trend that's going on in housing, really at pretty much every income level, is that, you know, so much of our residential area is R1, and there isn't really, you know, the space politically or physically to put the higher rise apartment buildings into those neighborhoods. So they are perforce landing now on the arterials, landing close to the freeways, landing close to mass transit. And that's a kind of reality that's born of the way we've built in LA. So let's now look at 2 more projects that also are taking advantage, I guess, of being on busier streets and also aimed at what one might call is apartment dwelling. We're looking at 2 sets of apartment buildings, higher rent than the ones we've just seen, but what one might call the missing middle. That is the missing middle of people that are ready to stay as renters, not necessarily this isn't catering to the missing middle that wants to be able to purchase.
Indeed. Well, these buildings are fascinating because it's essential to build these as well. It's those who do want to stay in cities and don't have the resources to build. I'm convinced it's not simply going to be a high rises and then low rise. It's going to be this missing middle, meaning like the size of the kind of density of duplexes to 4 to 5 story buildings. So this fits in that profile. It's an interesting project. It's in Koreatown. Again, it's interesting. The building was in a way trying to represent the diversity and density of Koreatown, which is frankly the densest part of Los Angeles. So thus the compression of units. So this was about knowing that we had to build a simple volume. How do you bring artistry? How do you bring architecture to it? So it was a very simple move, a radius curved facade. And I know, Frances, you and I have sat on this roof, but there's certain moments both in the courtyard and then the way that the building is treated, framing also balconies and windows, shades and shadows through the building. That was all played a big role. But what's also nice is there are families in this building, but there are also individuals and creative. It's a creative community. That's something that I've always been intrigued about. I'm friends with a number of people in the building, but I also am fascinated because when I go there, you see couples and you see families as well. So this is interesting. That gives that opportunity.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. And I guess I was using missing middle in terms of the income level, and you're applying missing middle to the scale, but I think they kind of wind up sort of satisfying both. But yes, in terms of the sort of spatial organization, so you've really wound up with 2 social spaces. You've got the atrium in the middle, which, by the way, means you don't have the double loaded corridor, so people can have windows on both sides. But so you've got your atrium space, you've got external walkways so people can see each other, and then you've got your rooftop. And that you've got this very activated space. And again, you had a developer that was prepared to pay that bit extra to allow that.
Indeed. And it's a good point. The term does actually apply conceivably to both ideas, but they all mean this. It's the same thing, because when you build these buildings, that the rents are lower because of the scale and proportion and the density of what you're doing. You can actually, by creating greater density in these type of buildings, you are allowing the opportunity where people who don't have deep pockets or have the resources can live here. And that's crucial. That's why these buildings existed in a way. When you look back to the history, from the not only to the dingbats, but also the duplexes to 3-story, 4-story buildings, it was always designed and built for that, that not only that income level, but also these buildings represent at that opportunity for people to be able to live in the city.
Great, great. So we have the black and white checkerboard here. We'll
Indeed.
go to one that is thematically in the same color. It's in the same color zone,
It is.
and the same income zone. Is there a connection?
Yeah. This is again a number of the buildings that we're doing, which is again addressing these issues. This one's in Silver Lake. It really, obviously, we know is a wonderful community, but it's also on a site. It's like a commercial artery, and it's something that I believe, I'm convinced, is also the future. That these commercial arteries, where there was conceivably an automotive store or dealers, are going to be in a way moving away from that, and that this should be opportunities for housing. They should be on these. It should be more mixed urban infill type scenarios. So by bringing housing to those primary arteries is the way people should be living. That means they can walk to things, and that's awfully important. But this was also trying to bring sensibility from their neighborhood buildings that are around and houses around. Can you create these outdoor spaces for them? So throughout this building, you can see again, the design of the building allows a number of balconies that are also common open space, but also private balconies. So that's awfully important as well, to be able to make sure that where possible, everyone has an outdoor space. And that's what the premise behind this idea. And that's what was what drove this idea. So the two ideas are commercial arteries. We have to invest in those areas. And that's ideal, because we need housing, and this is a way to do it.
Right, right. So on to the next project, which I know people are very interested in. And this is a slightly different demographic. And in this particular instance, for the most part, for a bunch of, good reasons, you're not going to do the private balconies, you're going to do the shared spaces. It's about the common space, the collective spaces. So this is really a fascinating project. Tell us its name, what it is, and then we'll talk some more.
Absolutely. It's Rossmore. It's on Rossmore. That's and it's what was interesting about this particular project was it was a wonderfully historical building, as you can see, the first 5 levels. And in a way, we had to embrace and recognize the importance of the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historical buildings. So we had to really recognize that it's important to embrace and also restore the existing building. Yet we also had to add density, and that was our task. So the design shows that. How do you build old and new? How do you recognize the importance of the existing structure and build on top of it, but also bring ideas to it? And so this, again, idea of these outdoor spaces and create this kind of indoor-outdoor experience vertically, like we did an SL project, was very important on this project. So as you go vertically, you also have that access to exterior. Crucial idea. But cities grow incrementally like this. You need to be able to look at the housing stock that exists and also restore that, renovate it, and bring housing. It's also co-living, which is extremely important. I'm convinced co-living is a future as well. We need more beds, and that's an idea. So this is a hybrid between co-living and conventional apartments. And that idea is a new paradigm for Los Angeles. Can you work with the existing housing stock, the existing buildings, but also stitch into it and also add to it? So this is what's fascinating to me on this project. So at least 33 of the co-living units are there. There are, some of the units have 5 to 6 beds in it. And then there were also 54 traditional units in it as well. So interesting. This building is, as you say, is awfully important for the city of Los Angeles right now, that you can work with existing structures and add to it in a very creative way, and in a way, a very, very intelligent way. And that's how I see this project.
So this is a building that's on the glorious Rossmore Avenue, really one of our most lovely boulevards, avenues, and it's part of that row of apartment buildings, several of which were built in the 1930s for you know, glamorous actors and actresses, people in the movie industry. They played golf at the country club. And this particular building only went up 5 stories. It wound up, I think, going through 2 phases of development. It was, the second phase was designed by Max Moltzmann, who was a, you know, a really important designer of the period. For, I think they were hit by some financial troubles. They wound up with 5 stories instead of, I think, 12. You're putting on another 5 stories. And then what's going to look quite different from the other buildings on Rossmore is you're putting your gardens up on the roofs, up on the terraces. That's going to look really interesting. But before we get to some of the details, of course, I have to ask, has there been any pushback on this project? Has the preservation community been upset by it, or because it never got finished in the first place? Is there some latitude?
To date, we're working closely with the neighborhood. I mean, the clients are great. The clients is Domus. That's our client on this. And again, just so you know, Richard Lauren also is involved in this as well, so which is really exciting. I've had obviously a 20-year relationship with him, so it's a very exciting team. And yes, we're working closely with the neighborhood and the communities, and then we're in process right now. But no, I think people are supportive of the project, and I'm convinced it's because we're respecting the existing structure, but we're also trying to deal with the stepped up massing again, so that the bulkiness of it is what we're working with. And that goes a long way in terms of how people perceive buildings. So that's what led to the overall idea here.
Right. But back to the, and we should say you'll be strengthening the lower parts of the building to hold up the rest, the new part.
Yes, there's a significant amount of, in terms of our requirements, that's what we're carefully looking at with regards to these historical buildings. We have to obviously take all those issues, look at the structure, look at all the components, and make sure that we bring that and restore that and bring it to life again.
And in terms of the public space, the gathering spaces, which have been the through line for everything that we've been looking at, here the emphasis is it's co-living. The idea behind co-living is that you have a small private space, a small bedroom perhaps within a pod with other people who've also got a small bedroom, but you offset that with a lot of shared amenities, shared open space, and then shared other amenities. And that's the thesis here, is it?
It is indeed. It means when you're, again, that shared space is crucial, and that was the driving force. So each level, they have this access to the exterior. And again, I'm convinced, as I said earlier, people are inherently social. They want that experience, and that's something that we try to bring all of our work, this social agency, to all these projects. And one can do it vertically. The section of a building is awfully important. So we always look at that as an issue as well. Certainly here, we had the existing footprint, the existing building. So how can we bring that aspect? We don't want to end up, as you mentioned earlier, to have this vertical building and they have to go to the ground plane to be able to have outdoor space. Can you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 outdoor shared spaces? That's what drove the project.
So this is definitely the exclamation point that we're putting on our story of LA housing that you've been working on. We do have some images of some other projects that you've worked on, not housing, but I also am looking at the clock and we've basically got 7 minutes till we come to the end of our evening. And I think people might have questions. So can you run us fast?
Yes, I will indeed.
Images, and that leaves us 5 minutes for some questions.
Indeed. As I mentioned, the ideas that underpin all of our work here in LOHA is this idea of social agencies, social spaces. And one can see here this project with Nike, which is adjacent to Culver City. It was a wonderful commission and of course, great clients. And in a sense, Nike was an amazing client for us because they're also about artistry and science. They produce these wonderful shoes and other apparel that in a way allows or affords the athlete to really do their best. In a sense, that idea of designing a shoe that is optimizes that individual is about the science of it, but also the artistry of that shoe is what is always fascinated me. So we had in a way, we were kindred spirits in this project. They saw our work in the same way. So the opportunity to work with them was great. And this is the entry. This shows the entry. It's a 50,000 square foot space. And in a sense, it was the global branding imaging operations for Nike. Over the years, Nike didn't have their own space where they could photograph their products. This is now where they do it. It's here in Los Angeles. And so it was a really exciting opportunity to work with them. And also, again, there's a theatrical quality to this as well inside. And this idea of having these outdoor spaces, the experiential quality as you enter in, create this really interesting stairwell, which is also an opportunity for people to connect. And then of course, on the right-hand side, you can see the outdoor spaces. So can we continue to bring the ideas that we apply to our housing projects or mixed-use urban infills? You can also certainly do it with these type of projects as well.
Great. Here we go. You've been very busy in Detroit.
Yes. This is
Wow.
a project that's close to my heart. An amazing artist, Oliami Davos, that I got to meet, having been busy in Detroit. And his lifelong mission in this particular African Beauty Museum was to bring or to educate people about African culture through this amazing collection of beads and his artwork. So this was an opportunity to work with an amazing individual. You can see in the building on the left, that's his art. That's a mural he created on the outside of this building. He was given this project. The interior of this building is completely collapsed. So he used the shell of the building as his canvas in a sense. And all that the art you see around the building is objects he met on that he grabbed from the sidewalk. So it's broken glass, it's broken ceramic, it's a variety of other type of materials, painted wood, and he created this incredible collage on the building. So, and now it's a historical building in Detroit. So we were thrilled to be able to work with him, not only in terms of renovating the space, which we've already finished one portion of it. The image on the right is the larger space, which is again, it's called the African Beauty Museum, but it's primarily a gathering space. He wants people to be able to come here, and we created a portion of it, which is inside, because given the climate in Detroit, we had to have that indoor space as well. So, but we also wanted during the summer to have an opportunity for people to actually come into the space and have events here as well. So it's not simply the art, but it's also a place for people to gather. And so that's what's very exciting to me. So this is one of the projects I did. This is another one, which is, again, another exciting project. It's in a sense, this building represents the future of Detroit. It's not downtown Detroit. You can see Detroit in the image on the left in the distance. This is the neighborhoods around it. And this is in a way, a new direction, which I'm very excited about, working with not only the planning director, Maurice Cox, an amazing individual, and also the mayor, Mayor Dugan of Detroit. They've been pushing the idea of investing in the neighborhoods, the African-American communities, as opposed to the old way in Detroit, which was you invest in downtown, and in effect, through the trickle-down effect, you then bring investments to the neighborhoods. And this is the opposite. Go into the neighborhoods, invest there, bring opportunities there, and then see how it connects to downtown. So that's a very exciting project for us. We're doing 4 buildings with this client. This is our most recently completed one, the wood building, but it also talks about the nature cities. There on the left is this wonderfully restored Victorian house. And so that was part of the community. You had these Victorian houses that were restored, and then we have the larger housing projects, which will bring in more housing to Detroit. Very exciting to work on this project. So we're doing 4 buildings for this client, of which 2 are completed and 2 others are all framed up right now. But yes, Detroit is an amazing city. It has its own story. It's very different than LA. LA, you have urban infill projects because we ran out of land. Detroit has an expansive new figure ground. It's about open fields. How do you build to the future? And that's what's fascinating for me and also my colleagues here in the office.
Huh. Well, gosh, and there are the colleagues in the office, and
Indeed it is.
There we are. And gosh, I'm looking at the clock. We literally have about 1 minute before we get to 7:30. So I just want to see if, Angelo, are you good if we just go for 5 minutes longer?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I can throw out some questions. This way you guys can just focus on the conversation. Maybe if we want to stop sharing your screen, Sinead, so that we can get Lorcan and Frances in a large image, that would be great, I think, for our guests. And okay, so to sort of piggyback off this last conversation about Detroit, someone has a question about low cost of living and lack of design-driven culture that they're experiencing in Columbus, Ohio, and they're wondering, what strategies can energize cities like theirs and demand projects like the ones that LOHA is known for?
In a sense, if I can jump in here, you need to have a visionary. Maurice Cox was crucial to Detroit. He was an individual who, an architect who used to be the director, I believe, at Tulane University. Someone who was committed to design. He took over the planning department in Detroit, and he brought design to it. He thought, the city needs to grow right. We have to do it in a smart way. So there was a number of projects of which we were commissioned twice to do larger studies of certain areas in Detroit. It was the Northwest Detroit study, which was 6 square miles, very large a study we did, which coincidentally we're now doing 2 buildings in that larger study. And then we did a second one, these 2 other areas called Russell Woods and Arden Park. And so there was a comprehensive approach to look at the big ideas, the big story, the brushstroke ideas in Detroit, but also the thing that was crucial was investing in the neighborhoods is the most key move that I believe Maurice and Mayor Dugan were pushing. And I was very fortunate to be part of the architects who were commissioned to do these. But also you have to be able to understand that in a sense, they don't have the resources in Detroit like they do in Los Angeles. So you have to design these projects that are much more efficient, but also they want good design because that's important. And quite obviously, there's a number of buildings going up in Detroit right now that don't have that culture of good design. But I would say I and my colleagues who are working there, we are committed to that. And I have to say the planning department in Detroit are committed to it. So you do need that. You need that core of people in the city who want that and recognize the value of that. And good design doesn't mean it costs more. You just have to design well.
Yeah, agreed, for sure. So there's a few questions that talk about how does architecture encourage culture to become more flexible and adaptive? And maybe, during this global scenario post-pandemic, what's the future role of public space and transformative solutions?
Okay.
That's a lot. That's
a big question. You go, Lorcan, you've got half a minute to go.
Okay, there we go. Well, give me an hour. I'll try to do a very, very concise answer here. I believe we are social at heart as human beings. I personally can't wait when we are, as you say, post-pandemic time, where we'll be able to engage each other and connect again. And I believe that there are multiple ways that you can create this social spaces that we need in cities. That is crucial. We need to have it. It goes back to my interest and fascination in Europe and the quality of spaces there. I believe that is the future here as well. So again, I'm not convinced I'm answering the overall idea of the overall question, but in the post-pandemic time, we will come back to a place where we need to be able to create these spaces where people can hang out and really make an effort to do it. And there is an opportunity within cities like Los Angeles, but you have to be creative and be able to push and be committed to it. So the future is this. I'm convinced we will go back to a place where areas, and you see it happening. The idea of the transit right now, public transit is allowing opportunities to be able to engage people in a more robust way. Think about all that. That's how people connect. So that's the future. It will continue.
So Lorcan, from the presentation, I've gathered that you are a problem solver, a social issue problem solver, utilizing your capabilities. And there's some questions about locally, LA and the surroundings are very expensive, yet we have these giant malls and offices that are empty. And, what are your thoughts about reclaiming some of those spaces for housing insecurity or applying, doing things like that socially?
It's crucial. In a way, it was what I was trying to hint at with the Rossmore project, is you have to work with the housing supply or the building supply that exists, meaning you need to go in and you have to address maybe motels, all these other components, the malls. They could all be utilized to really address this issue of housing. And across the board, both all socioeconomic levels, we need more. But absolutely, you need to work with the housing supply or the building supply that exists and be able to reformulate all that. And that's solving problems. But I totally agree, it needs to be done. And to me, it's about that idea that you can, again, that's how cities grow anyway. It's about that idea. It's about taking a space. And as time goes by, there's new programs you need to insert. And that's a very crucial approach to cities. You have to do that. And right now, housing is the most crucial. One can't afford to be in this city right now. The only way to do is provide more product, provide more housing. Then the numbers will drop. Then it'll be easier to live here. So all that, I completely agree. This has to be addressed. Corner mini malls, all those aspects could be reformulated into much needed essential programs like housing.
Okay, I'm going to go hyper local and ask about the Wellesley project in Culver City. Is there a private public space on private land included in that project?
There's a component in the front. There's an arts component in the front as well, a space for people to hang out instead. That's a hybrid program. We have more of a kind of a gallery space on the first level. Then we have offices, and then we have the housing above it. And it's next to one of my colleague and friend, Tom Main Morphus's, his office building. So honored to be building next to him and his office. And but yes, it's a very interesting approach with that project. That's a hybrid program, which I also think is crucial. You need to, when you build these projects, bring that activated spaces, bring office spaces along with housing, and also conceivably retail or galleries of sorts.
Great. Well, I'm going to start my video very quickly, just to say that all of the questions and comments in the Q&A are about how inspiring your work is, how enjoyable this evening was. I want to thank you both for being here. Frances, any last thoughts?
Oh gosh, well, just which of Lorcan's buildings can I go and live in? You know, I mean, it's just the choice. The choice is so hard. No, it's really really a pleasure, and just to see the continuity, the sort of, you know, as I said, when I met you, Lorcan, when you were just getting going on housing in Los Angeles.
Early to mid-90s, yes.
Early to mid-90s. And when you were doing your vertical house in Venice with your slit windows, and that in itself was very visually interesting. But anyway, just to see how you have built up this real sort of tapestry of work, taking on the city's issues with every project, and I guess developing your own artistic palette, which is becoming less colorful, it seems.
Well, I've always thought color is an artificial material, but certainly black and graphite is a color. So I guess white is a great color. White, when light hits it, it reflects so many colors. So it's all good.
Yes, yeah, no, very, very exciting. And I too saw those questions and answers that were coming in. And definitely, I think there's a few people that would like to work for you, Lorcan.
Yeah, people are wondering if you're hiring.
Anyway, it's great. I look forward to the next conversation being in person.
Yes.
And I echo Angela in thanking all of you that are here tonight. I can't see your faces because of the technology that we're using, but I know you're there, and thank you so much. Yes. And I think did we mention Arcana, which is the bookstore at Helms? Yes,
we did. And
we'll mention them again.
In the chat, we can mention them again. Yes, you can buy the book at Arcana. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. The color is spectacular. It's just even doesn't do it justice on the screen. It's so vivid and beautiful. So thank you both.
I'm really excited about the book. It's always wonderful to be able to reflect on one's work and really understand it, core into the ideas that underpin it. And also, as again, really excited for the book. And again, thank you both to Sinead Finnerty-Prine, who is deeply embedded, deeply involved with it, also collectively the whole office, and Greg Golden, and of course, Frances. Thank you so much. But the book I'm really proud of. It talks about important issues. And I have to say, everybody, thank you for all your contributions. And of course, my office. The work is about collectively our team here. And so I'm really honored to be to work with the people I'm working with right now, and also your good selves as well.
Great. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Yes.
All
Bye.
right.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.